It's my great pleasure to introduce to you Dewi Fortuna Anwar as the keynote speaker for the main part of the update that's addressing the reflections on President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono's term as president. And I suspect that many of us don't need to read any of the biographical entries about Bu Dewi because she's already very well known to us. She's a regular visitor to Australia. She's always a memorable presenter, whether in conferences like this or also on the media. She's always wonderfully articulate and candid in her remarks. I always especially enjoy when she comments on Australian-Indonesian relations. She's currently a Foreign Affairs Advisor to Vice President Yudhoyono, and she was just telling me about the very onerous reporting tasks that she currently has to do now that it's coming to the end of the term for the Vice President. But she's taken herself away from all of that heavy workload, and she's written a keynote address for us today, and we really look forward, Bu Dewi, to hearing your remarks. And there's been a slight change in the timing, so we were to have another 10 minutes, but we've started 5 minutes late, so you have another 5 minutes, and then we'll have some question and answers if time allows.
Thank you, Greg, for that kind introduction. Just maybe just some update. My position with Yudhoyono at the moment is actually Deputy for Political Affairs, and that covers everything. There's politics, security, foreign affairs, so domestic and international as well. So it's a bit unwieldy. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've been asked to do this keynote speech, and so that I could be disciplined, I'm actually going to read it. I don't usually read speeches, Greg, but I think that because it says keynote speech, so I'll make it into a speech. So, so colleagues, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I'm truly honored to have been invited by the organizers of this year's Indonesia Update Conference to deliver the keynote address on the theme of the Yudhoyono years, a critical assessment. I have apparently been given this task for being both an insider in the current Yudhoyono-Budiono administration and an academic who can be expected to be candid in expressing an opinion. Now, this is clearly not an easy burden, as I'm bound to anger my superiors and colleagues in government if I'm too critical, and there are a number of people from the embassy here who will be reporting, while at the same time disappointing fellow academics and outside observers for highlighting the considerable achievements of the past years. So everybody is not going to be happy with me. It is, in fact, often difficult to get a clear picture about Indonesia if one simply relies on media reports. If one reads news or commentaries in the Indonesian media or watch various talk shows on Indonesian television, one would get the impression that the country is a basket case. Indonesia is at times portrayed as a failed state or very near to failing, with a huge number of population still living in poverty, a crumbling infrastructure, myriad social conflicts, and a high level of corruption. Many are critical of the government's perceived weakness vis-à-vis the outside world. Listening to the rhetoric during the recent presidential race, as already mentioned by Ed and Marcus, one would be left with the impression that Indonesia is a weak state, powerless in the face of external machinations bent on controlling the country's natural resources, an object rather than a subject in international relations, and lacking the wherewithal to stand up and be counted in this increasingly competitive and global era. On the other hand, reporting in foreign media in recent years has mostly been complimentary towards Indonesia. In sharp contrast to the negative image that it had projected onto the world stage in the immediate post-Suharto years, Indonesia is now mostly seen as a success story. Indonesia's success in managing its democratic transition peacefully has received international plaudits, particularly when so many other countries have failed dismally. Indonesia's economic recovery and its status as a new emerging economy, as well as Indonesia's constructive role in the region, have drawn praises. Far from being regarded as a failed or failing state, Indonesia has often been regarded as a model for countries embarking on democratic transition, whether in the predominantly Muslim countries in the Middle East and North Africa or within Southeast Asia. Official speeches by the current Indonesian leaders have clearly emphasized the favorable narrative and glossed over the still many shortcomings. The truth clearly lies somewhere in between. Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono will go down in history as Indonesia's first directly elected president, serving for 2 full terms between 2004 and 2014, the maximum allowed by the amended 1945 Constitution. Yudhoyono's election as president in 2004, with Yusuf Kala as vice president, and his re-election in 2009 with Budiono as vice president, marked the end of Indonesia's first phase of transition from authoritarianism to democracy. As most of the fundamental enabling legislations for reform had been passed during the administrations of Habibie, Abdurrahman Wahid, and Megawati, Yudhoyono has been charged with overseeing the implementation of the various reform measures in order to consolidate Indonesia's hard-won democracy. So Yudhoyono was popularly elected as president twice to rule over a new Indonesia in which new institutions have been created, among others to ensure greater political participation, better government accountability, a more empowered civil society, a truly independent judiciary, and better rule of law. Thus, the Yudhoyono presidency will be judged to a greater or lesser degree on its success or failures in moving Indonesia forward onto the next level of reform as envisaged in the ideals of Reformasi. An objective observer will acknowledge that today Indonesia is stronger, more democratic, more united, and more prosperous than it was 10 years ago. Various challenges that came its way, be it natural disasters, terrorism, or global financial crisis, have served as lessons learned, so that Indonesia's ability to respond to these challenges have improved over time. While all of these achievements are the result of collective efforts by the various stakeholders, we can certainly give the government a large part of the credit. Here, I would just like to present a broad brushstroke of what the Yudhoyono years have meant for Indonesia and their likely legacy. The first and arguably the most important marker of the past 10 years is Indonesia's relatively successful democratic political transformation, which has brought about political stability and normality. After the first tumultuous, if not chaotic, few years of Reformasi, in which many had blamed the rapid pace of political liberalization, democratic processes seem to have taken roots in Indonesia. While recognizing the still many shortcomings, democracy has on the whole been accepted as the most acceptable way of governing Indonesia and worthy of being nurtured and preserved. Direct elections have become a prominent feature of Indonesia's democracy. Indonesians now believe that the only legitimate and acceptable way of choosing their president and vice president are through direct election. The same goes for the selections of governors, bupatis, and mayors, which since 2005 have also been carried out through direct elections. While direct elections for regional leaders have revealed various weaknesses, notably the prevalence of money politics, attempts to return to the earlier practice of elections by the DPRD have met widespread public opposition. Notwithstanding the argument that members of the DPRDs are also directly elected, most Indonesians are now loath to give up their right to choose their leaders directly, or to put absolute trust on their elected representatives to choose the desired candidates. Although elections are often noisy and at times lead to disputes, in the past 10 years, it has become commonplace to bring the cases to the new established constitutional court, whose decision is final and binding. So thus, within the past 10 years, political changes have become regular events in Indonesia, not a matter of life and death that would merit prolonged disagreements, let alone open conflicts. With rare exceptions, elections at the national, provincial, and local level have mostly been peaceful. At the same time, the possibility that the losers of today can win the election in 5 years' time has reduced the need for people power or other unconstitutional means to try to remove those in office precipitously. For Indonesia, the democratic experience has therefore been a virtuous circle resulting in greater legitimacy of the state and greater political and government stability as a whole. Secondly, decentralization has truly flourished in Indonesia in the past 10 years, moving the country a long way from the centralized and Java-centric situation of the New Order era. The wide-ranging regional autonomy with the district and town as its locus has brought about both positive and negative changes in terms of democratic participation, governance, and development outcomes. Some regions have excelled under the new decentralized system with new initiatives and better public services and enhanced welfare, while others have lagged behind due to lack of capacity, corruption, and mismanagement. What is important to note, however, is that regional autonomy has truly realized the ideal of Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, or unity and diversity, unity in diversity. The possibility of each region to showcase its uniqueness and capitalize on its respective competitive advantage have made Indonesia become more challenging and more interesting. The action is no longer just in the big cities in Java, for opportunities are now spread across the archipelago. True, lack of connectivity remains a major constraint in developing the regions, but today, Indonesia can no longer be sufficiently described as comprising Java and those outer islands, we don't accept that anymore. The advent of regional autonomy has also transformed the political landscape at the national level. Direct elections have made it possible for new leaders to emerge, even without the backing of major political parties. The success of many district heads in developing their regions in various innovative ways have now increasingly been noted by the country at large. While until recently, national political elites congregate in the capital and are mostly drawn from those with military or bureaucratic background or those with political pedigrees, now, starting with the election of Solo Mayor Joko Widodo as governor of Jakarta and the Bupati from Belitung, Basuki Cahayapurnama, or Ahok, a Chinese, as vice governor, a reverse process has already taken place. Now, Indonesia has a much larger pool of potential leaders, not just limited to the old elites in the greater Jakarta area, but increasingly including those with experience of governing in the regions. Third, President Yudhoyono concludes his presidency of a country that is now more united, more secure, and with a greater capacity to deal with crises than a decade ago. In the past 10 years, Indonesia has been able to recover from a series of major natural disasters, including the devastating tsunami in Aceh, soon after Yudhoyono assumed his presidency in late 2004. Indonesia has also ended a long drawn-out separatist insurgency in Aceh through a negotiated peace agreement and successfully dealt with terrorist threats. There are now no major conflicts straining national unity, with the exception of simmering problems in Papua. Special agencies have been established at the national and regional levels to deal with natural disasters, as Indonesia sits in the ring of fire that is prone to earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunami, landslides, and so on. Indonesia's capacity to fight terrorist threats has also improved considerably in the past few years, with the establishment of a special anti-terrorist police unit and national counter-terrorism agency. Fourth, the conducive political and security climate that Indonesia has enjoyed in the past decade has made it possible for an uninterrupted economic growth. Indonesia's economy has recovered fully from the devastation brought by the financial crisis in the late 1960s, and though growth has not reached the high level of the New Order period, it has recovered. The economy has also become much more resilient, although it was considered to be agak fragile, so that it continued to enjoy positive growth even during the recent global financial crisis. Indonesia's economic competitiveness has also improved considerably in the past 10 years. Most economists will know that the World Economic Forum's report showed that in 2004, Indonesia ranked number 69 out of 104 countries. In 2009, at the end of Yudhoyono's first term, Indonesia grew to number 54 in the world out of 134 countries, and now Indonesia has moved up again to rank number 34 out of 144 countries, apparently mostly due to a marked improvement in governance and infrastructure. Improvement is in fact scored the highest. So the national economy has grown nearly fourfold in the past 10 years, ranking 16 in the world, so that Indonesia is now a member of the G20. And according to the World Bank, based on purchasing power parity, Indonesia's economy is actually number 10 at the moment. Fifth, the virtuous circle of political stability and economic development has also made it possible for the government to carry out various ambitious social and welfare programs. While sustained economic growth has led to a rapid rise of the middle class and a widening income inequality, absolute poverty has in fact been reduced through a wide-ranging and better targeted welfare measures. Education has received 20% of the national budget as mandated by the Constitution, and Indonesia is now pursuing a compulsory 12 years education, though as it was Sophie mentioned, we need to talk about quality rather than just quantity. At the same time, Indonesia has also recently launched one of the world's most ambitious national healthcare system, aimed at giving health coverage to most of Indonesia's 250 million population, though demands still far outstrip supplies. Six, in the past 10 years, Indonesia has also been active in regional and international arena. Yudhoyono himself has taken an active interest and role in Indonesia's foreign policy. Fully recovered from the setbacks of the immediate post-Suharto period, Indonesia now is an acknowledged leader of ASEAN, while ASEAN itself has gained recognition as a driver for wider regional community building in East Asia. Indonesia has also tried to strengthen its democratic credential internationally by actively promoting democracy through the Bali Democracy Forum. Globally, Indonesia regularly contributes to international peacekeeping efforts. Indonesia has an ambition of being one of the top 10 troop contributing countries. Seven, civil society has truly become a force to be reckoned with in Indonesia in the past decade. Citizen activism, aided ably by the revolution in ICT, has been deployed to galvanize support for causes that grab public attention, such as saving the KPK, if you remember, from criminalization by the police, helping an individual, such as, say, a Coin for Prita movement, organizing a major rock concert that you saw the photo to support the presidential campaign of Joko Widodo when his popular support began to slip, and lately also opposing the proposed ending of the direct election of regional heads. Indonesians are avid users of social media, number 4 Facebook users, I think, and Twitters. And the most prominent user is none other than President Yudhoyono. As you know, he tweeted his displeasure at Tony Abbott. Yudhoyono posts several tweets daily and occasionally uploads his messages to for the public on YouTube, such as his recent posting in support of continuing the direct election for regional heads. So these are just some of the notable achievements of the past 10 years. At the same time, the challenges that Indonesia continues to face are numerous and often daunting. While one should laud the Yudhoyono presidency for the remarkable progress that Indonesia has made, there are also a number of serious shortcomings. Here, I would just like to highlight a few areas of concern. The promotion and protection of human rights are now enshrined in the amended 1945 Constitution, and by and large, the human rights condition in Indonesia has improved considerably. Nevertheless, there are important cases in which the government has failed to deliver on its promise or to carry out its responsibility. The murder of human rights activist Munir has remained unresolved for 10 years. The government has also failed to protect religious freedom in a number of serious cases when religious minorities were attacked by intolerant groups claiming to protect the purity of Islam. Densus 88 has at times used excessive force in dealing with terrorist suspects, while human rights violations continue to take place with distressing frequency in Papua. Yudhoyono and his Democrat Party pledged to fight corruption during his election campaign. And in fact, for the past 10 years, great stride has been made in this arena. The powerful KPK has been quite ruthless in going after corrupt public officials, and no one is spared. The public, however, has become disenchanted with the Democratic Party, which lost heavily in the last legislative election when it was revealed that party elites had misused their power and influence to embezzle public funds. Two ministers from the Democrat Party, as already mentioned earlier, and lately another minister from the PPP have been under cloud. Two has already been, Andi Marangi has already been sentenced, but Jero Wachik and Surya Dharma Ali are now under questions. Nearly 300 regional heads have also been charged by KPK for corruption. Corruption in high places by political elites has been seen as an undesirable side effect of democratic practices as politicians and political parties tried to raise funds for their political needs. Notwithstanding the considerable achievement in the past 10 years, there is also a general feeling that the Yudho government could have achieved much more. Decision-making in a democracy is clearly more challenging and time-consuming than under an authoritarian system. Hope was high, however, that during his second term, Yudhoyono would be able to move much faster and make bolder decisions to deal with unpopular but necessary measures, such as reducing, if not ending, fuel subsidies. After all, President Yudhoyono was re-elected within a single round with a convincing majority and has remained generally positively popular, even though people have expressed dissatisfactions over various issues. Moreover, the President Party controlled the largest number of seats in Parliament, and together with the ruling coalition in his second term, Yudhoyono theoretically has the support of over 75% of members of Parliament. The reality, however, has been somewhat different. The unwieldy coalition cabinet has more often than not become a liability as ministers from the different political parties frequently disagreed with the president openly and with impunity, while the expected support in Parliament for unpopular measures, such as cutting the fuel subsidy, also did not materialize. So why the government failed to cut the fuel subsidies? Because the government rejected it last year, Parliament rejected it last year, and the most vociferous opponent was actually the PDIP. Finally, I would like to comment briefly on the two vice presidents who had such contrasting styles, but each in his own way ably assisted the president. Vice President Kala is a businessman, a politician, and a social activist with an outgoing personality and who is not shy to put himself forward or take credit where it is due. Kala was credited for the peaceful settlement of the Aceh conflict and for his troubleshooting skill in various intractable issues. As the chairman of Golkar, which had the most number of seats in the parliament of 2004 and 2008, Kala was also an effective political broker who could ensure that DPR support the government on key issues. Towards the end, there was a clear rivalry for the limelight between the president and vice president, and in fact, Kala ran for president to challenge Yudhoyono. For his second term, Yudhoyono chose Budiono as vice president, whose background and personality and style could not be more different from Kala. Yudhoyono is a highly respected economist and technocrat with no political base of his own. While not exactly self-effacing, Vice President Yudhoyono has deliberately kept a low profile so that the public is left relatively in the dark of what exactly has the Vice President been doing for the past 10 years. And he has been extremely reluctant to take any credit. To our disgust, actually, in the office, because most of the work has been done there, but he refused to take credit, including last year when the Vice President office provided a booklet on frequently asked questions on why we need to cut fuel subsidies. If you go to the Vice President's website, you'll see that a booklet there. In reality, President Yudhoyono has in fact entrusted Pak Budiono with the task of supervising and coordinating the several key government policies: the planning and execution of bureaucratic reform, better targeted poverty alleviation measures, the acceleration of development in Papua and West Papua, as well as the development of major infrastructure projects such as the building of new ports, airports, toll roads, double track railways, and power plants have all been done under the personal direction of the Vice President. So in conclusion, the Yudhoyono years have laid down a strong foundation for the next government to build upon. It seems, however, that Indonesians now want to chart a new course and make a clear break with the past by choosing Joko Widodo, a truly new type of political leader, as the president for the next 5 years. Thank you very much.
Okay, now we have an opportunity for questions and comments, and once again we'll take them in batches of 3 and we'll try to select people from across the room. Can you raise your hand, and before you ask your question, could you identify yourself and where you come from? So, questions. So, 1 Sydney, 2 in the front. Is there someone up the back somewhere? Right up the back, okay. So begin with Sydney first.
Sesama bis kota nggak boleh ya.
Sydney Jones from IPAC. One gets the impression, looking at the Yudhoyono administration, that it was completely reactive rather than proactive and excessively concerned about media criticism and parliamentary criticism. So I guess I want to find what it looks like from the inside. Is that an accurate assessment? And can you think of a single proactive policy that Yudhoyono undertook in the first or second term? Thanks.
Okay.
Afi from the Climate Line Youth Alliance. I just want to add on the policy for acknowledging and protection of indigenous people. So there's difference of how this was in the Vice President palace when it happened on the 1st of September. But there is some difference, and this is probably what is the insight on the difference between the President and the reality on the acknowledgement of indigenous peoples as an issue and as a policy. Thank you.
And Ross?
Thank you. Ross McLeod from the Indonesia Project. On the topic of corruption, if the measure of corruption is how many corrupt people have been put in jail, KPK, as you say, has been phenomenally successful. But if the measure of success is the level of corruption itself, I don't think any of us really thinks that corruption has declined at all. If you agree with that, do you think Jokowi is going to be any more successful in reducing the level of corruption than SBY was? And if so, how do you think he might go about that?
Okay, thank you. 3 easy questions. Sydney, is the president and the government just reactive rather than proactive? On the one hand, I think it's true. Bapak Yudhoyono is very media conscious and cares about his image and doesn't want to be unpopular. And it's always very hard task, to balance. You want to be loved, and yet if you want to take various very strict measures, you're going to be unpopular. And he's been rather risk averse. But there are actually a number of issues which probably do not get into the public media. For example, there is a real desire, to improve the situation in Papua, and the government took a proactive role there. But the reality is that it doesn't make headlines. When you make peace settlement in Aceh, it grabs the headlines. But if you want to deliver maternity service to the highlands in Papua, or if you want to build more markets and so on, that really does not grab the attention of media. But a lot has actually been done in that level. This infrastructure, for example, it is interesting if you read this recent report that the World Economic Forum actually gave credits to these infrastructures. There are a number of new airports and ports are in place. But of course, political scientists do not read that, although economists do. So there are a number of maybe you might see more micro initiatives, but there are no major ones. And how is it like? There's a lot of frustration. We in the Vice President office sometimes ask Pak Yudhoyono to bang on the table a bit, especially, for example, on the fuel subsidies. If it was not left too late, it would have been done. The deal could have been made. And if the president was able to lead his coalition more effectively and make sure that the chairman of Golkar and the chairman of all the coalition partners ensure that there's discipline within parliament to support the president, including PAN. After all, the PAN minister and chairman is also a brother-in-law. And they all supported the government's policy on cutting fuel subsidies. So that's why we prepared the frequently asked questions flyers. That when we went to parliament, and in the beginning it was only PDIP and Gerindra on the opposition parties, the parties that are not in the government, that oppose the cutting of fuel subsidies. But then one by one, PAN left, PKS left, Golkar left. I mean, as I said, if I were the president, I would be very angry with my ministers. And I would fire some of them. But it didn't happen. So, and that, as I said, with impunity. Because I remember the PKS actually challenged the president to fire the ministers. That didn't happen either. So this was, in fact, bad lessons that Jokowi should not do. on indigenous people, as you know, we already have the undang-undang, yeah, protecting the hak wilayat and so on. So there's greater recognition now with that undang-undang and also KPK ruling about the protections of indigenous people's rights and so on. But unfortunately, in terms of the implementation, it also has to wait for the new law on agrarian reform and so on. So there are certain movements, but here is more technical. So when we actually make bold moves in one arena, it impacts on other sectors. And a lot of these sectors, are very difficult to deal with. So I think that is still a long, an uphill struggle. So Pak Ross tadi untuk ini, the corruption, yeah? I think on the one hand, KPK has put the fear of God, particularly to government officials. The criminalization of decision-making process, like, there's criminalization on Bank Century, will probably, the positive way that government officials will be much more careful in dealing with huge amounts of money and so on, and will not want to be put in orange jackets. Now it's white jackets. But the downside would be that there will be even more risk-averse bureaucrats, leaders. Now, for politicians, they tend to have short-term memories. They keep, many of them think that it will not happen to them. I mean, hello, we have so much problems, and then you have Jawarawacik, and you have Surya Dharma Ali, and so on, and this is within the past few years. So I think that Indonesia is not a unique country. If people have opportunities, then they will do it. So in that sense, we really have to have laws that are stronger on the preventive side, not just on the repressive sides, but they're also greater transparency. Now the move towards e-government and e-procurement, I think, would help a lot. So Jokowi, when he was asked that question about how he would improve governance and prevent corruption, he said, when you have everything now, and people can control you directly, maybe that would help them. And also, I think that we also need to do something about campaign financing. Because at the moment it's just hypocritical. People report that they spend about 3 million, while in fact if you just look at the kind of commercials that they do, it's a huge amount of money. So we really need to fix some of the details about election finances as well.
Okay, we might just take 2 short questions if we could, please. So one question there. Is there another question from somewhere right up the back? Yes. Okay. So.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. Jean-Luc Moret, Graduate Institute in Geneva. I would be interested to know, and maybe other people too, about one of the failures you mentioned of the SBY administration, the aggravation of income and social inequality in the country, which are much stronger today than they were under Suharto, which is a bit of a problem. Was there any discussion about these issues in the government, especially from Pak Yudhoyono? And was there anything that was discussed about how to deal with this time bomb, basically?
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you. Bu Dewi, I want to ask about your opinion about the MP3EI policy and impacts so far, and the Jokowi's reluctance to continue the policy. Thank you.
Okay. When the first question, on inequality, that is a major issue. Of course, on the one hand, as country developed very rapidly, and I'm scared to talk in front of so many economists, not being an economist and not being an ANU graduate. and Pak Faisal Basri. Yeah, and Pak Faisal Basri will be talking about the social issues. But under the current administration, a special unit has been established in the Vice President's office. It's called TNP2K. That's a national team for the eradication of poverty. One of the issues about Indonesia's poverty alleviation measures in the past was poor data. A lot of the disbursements of bantuan tunai langsung, or direct subsidies and so on, it's not well targeted, and in fact being misused and corrupt, and used for corrupt practices, and also used for political purposes. So one of the first attempt, it doesn't look like something that is too sexy that political scientists pay attention to. But I think that those who are in policy making and trying to disburse subsidies and healthcare and assistance for education, they need to have the good data. And here, the current government actually assisted by AusAid. It is very much a DFAT, Australian government and Indonesian government project, getting this data right. So by name, by address. And they have done this in order to give assistance to households, in order to give credits to small-scale business enterprises, and also in order to give community developments. So this is working well, and I hope that the next government will continue that. And I hope that Australia will continue also to assist in that project, because it's one good thing. So despite the saga of WikiLeaks and things like that, despite the fact that we didn't have an ambassador here for 6 months, that continued to work very, very, very well. On MP3A, I think that there are, it's very, very ambitious, and it's still only at a very starting stage. I think the challenge is more in getting the right model for the public-private partnership. I think that because the government's funding for many of these projects is very, very limited, it has to get a lot of external fundings. And that means that you need to be able to convince foreign investors to come. But as the rhetoric said here, yeah, bring us our money, but we hate you. So that doesn't help very well. But if you remember, also a lot of these infrastructure projects deal with land acquisition issue, and land acquisition has been very, very difficult. One of the achievements, of course, of the Yudhoyono is the passing of that law on land acquisition. So if we have an enabling regulation, hopefully the next government will be able to do that better. And Jokowi said that he will not continue it probably under the name, but those, when he talked about Jalan, Jalan Tol, Laut, whatever, that's like the pendulum under the MP3A, building ports and connectivity between the various ports. So I think that Jokowi will continue, but he's going to stress more on maritime development. Thank you.
I'd just like to formally thank Dewi for giving a very wide-ranging survey of the achievements and indeed the failings, a frank assessment of the failings of the SBY government, and for answering questions so thoroughly. It's very interesting to hear an insider's view of what's going on in government, and she's provided a wonderful basis for the discussions that are going to follow in the subsequent sessions. So join me in thanking again Dewi.